Hello everyone. In today's video, I thought we'd do something a little bit different. Recently, we've been doing a lot of kind of experimental different ideas, and I thought it'd be a good time to kind of run back and do a little bit of stuff with some scenarios. So when I was kind of sitting there going, I'd really like to do something in the Cold War. It would be kind of a neat scenario that kind of blends in some elements I brought in before, as well as bring in some elements that maybe are a little bit new to some folks. And I was poking around my library, and I came across this kind of interesting book called The Emerging Shield. And for those of you who haven't tracked this one down, you can actually grab this. This is just a PDF. It came right out of the defense.gov. There's actually a whole library of these kind of books, and they're super duper fascinating. But basically, what this book talked about is it talked about, let me get down to our table of contents down here. This is really interesting stuff, at least to me, is it talked about the problem of air defense from the United States perspective. It went into the early years, which is actually a really curious read because it talks about things like, well, they initially used machine guns, and then they used a large caliber artillery, which could traverse upwards. And then they talk about World War II, how they start to bring in the integrated air defense system. They have a whole piece here that says, okay, now aircraft are getting faster. What do? We talked about this guy named Sayville, a very, very creative little guy who invented the radar fence, which we know is the DEW line. We'll deal with that later. We invented something called Continental Air Command, CAC, which we barely even saw this thing. Later on, of course, it became Air Defense Command, which is what we're going to concentrate on in us. The Navy, of course, got involved and talk a little bit about this. Of course, the Ruskies got themselves one of those atomic bombs, and everything got very serious. We had Korea, which was kind of interesting because we realized how dangerous jets are. Then it started talking about SAGE, which was an amazing system, which you can see right here. Basically, a computerized air defense system that we had for many, many years. And of course, then later on, it became the Joint Command, which was much, much later. And then they started talking about the ICBMs and how the traditional idea of defending against a bomber basically became moot. Now, the reason I really love this book is because it actually gets into the nuts and bolts, which every once in a while you get lucky. Let me actually skip ahead just a teeny tiny bit. There we go. So what it'll do is it'll actually do things like describe where the different crews were and where they operated and stuff along those lines. Scrolling all the way down here, it would even do things that you're really, really going to need to know. It told us how many of different aircraft were available at different years. It could tell you things like, what kind of bombers they were expecting about. It talks about Beaumark. It talks about Sage, everything like that. Look at the size of this building, by the way. So this is really, really cool. But how do we translate something like this into a scenario? So the first thing first is I'm thinking, okay, so why was this developed? It was basically designed as a way to counteract any sort of, basically massive bomber invasion from the Soviet Union. Now, there was a perception for quite a while, and the Russians had no problem kind of continuing this deception that they had basically 1,500 nuclear bombs ready to go at a moment's notice. We know past, much, much later on, that wasn't true. But, we might as well play to the fears and see if it actually happened. That is the point of command, right? Okay, so let's work out the geography real quickly here, and then we'll work out where everybody's got to go. Like I said, this is probably going to be a multi-part video. I don't think I can do all of this in one sitting. So basically, here's our good old Russia. We got our Siberia on this side of things. We got Kamchatka over here on the right, and everything like this. So if we wanted to attack the continental United States with a bomber, if we were to do it in basically a straight line, we're going to get something that looks a little bit like this. We can go all the way over to like Murmansk and the Kola Peninsula and everything along those lines. Severnaya is over this way. But we end up with about a 4,000 nautical mile direct line if we're going to try to harass Washington, D.C. directly. Now, if we're interested in, let's say, attacking Texas, which is a little bit further away, you can see that trip jumps up to about 4,500 nautical miles in a straight line. So looking at this, that's a heck of a distance. So what do we have for bombers? Well, before we do that, we need to figure out what year we're going to pick for the scenario. Now, for me, I'm going to go with 1955. The reason I like 55 is it's just before we started getting all the fighter aircraft that you saw, like the F-102, F-104s, F-100s. And we were just getting to those transitional days when we had, not so great airplanes such as the F-89 or the F-94 and a bunch of really, really goofy solutions. But the good news was that the other guys really didn't have bombers that were capable of doing anything dangerous. So let's take a look at what we have at our disposal for that era. So first things first, from the Russians' perspective, we have a couple different bombs that we can utilize here. Again, I should be more specific. This is the USSR. It's not just Russia. I'm going to make that mistake about 1,000 times. You're going to have to forgive me for that. So I'm going to go ahead and set my database. We're going to set it to Cold War database. Remember, do that first before you do anything with a new scenario. And now we are in business. So let's go ahead and set this to Soviet Union. Soviet. Is it me? Is there no Soviet Union here? It's right there. Okay, let's take a look. So we had the Bison, which came out in 1958. This is a very, very big jet bomber. It's actually a really cool bomber if you've never seen a picture of this thing. Sometimes you get lucky and they got a good picture. Not going to worry about it too much. Those are all not things we got. We have the IL-28, which, oh man, you want to talk about a goofy bomber. This is pretty darn goofy. It's pretty cool, actually. We have everybody's favorite. We're going to go down to Tupolev because they were pretty much the bomber crew over there. They're like your Boeing of the day. Let's scroll down. Tupolev. We want the Tupolev. Obviously not the Fiddler. The Bosun, no, we're not interested in that. But what we are interested in is the Badger A, which came out in 1955. So the Badger A is in. So let's see here. The Badger A has a range. Let's scroll all the way down to the bottom. Again, this would be the research phase of missions like this. Some people do like to take a look at this. Let's see here. 45,000 feet. That's going to give us a pretty good, let's see what we have. We carry one RN-42. That's going to give us, let's see here. Scroll down to the loadouts. RN-42 gets us a 1,300 nautical mile, which is actually 2,600 nautical miles because it's a one-way mission, and we intend to treat it that way. So I'm going to go ahead and grab myself my notepad real quickly. Again, this is exactly what I do in the real world. You know, this is the real world. G16A has got a 1600 NM max. So that's it. That's as far as we're going to get with that one. So that's not bad. We have a couple different versions of the Badger, of course, and all these are a little bit too late for us because remember, we need 1955 here. So let's go through the Badgers. That's not too bad. I'll be the Tupolev 2, which is a teeny, teeny, tiny airplane. I don't think it's going to be able to get to us. No, not even close. That's going to give us 300 nautical miles. Garbage. We have the Blinder, which we can't use yet because it's too new. This is the one I was hoping to find. The Bull. We have the A and we have the regular one. What's the difference, you might ask? The A model carries an RU-57, and it has a 2,324 nautical mile strike radius. Okay, now we're talking 2324 times 2. That's a 4,600 nautical miles. Hey, I like that. 4,600 NM max. Okay, we can work with that. All right, let's see what else we have. Do we get we can't have any of these. These don't actually exist. Let's see here. We have the KD. How about the Bear A? 1957. That is so lame. This would be a great bomber for this particular exercise, but unfortunately, it just does not have the reach that we can use for this. And that's going to be it as far as what we get for bombers, which is a little depressing. Okay, so let's work with this. If we're doing a TU-4, that's going to give us a range of, 4,600 nautical miles, which means if we want to hit Austin, we're going to do something that looks like this, which means our strike is going to be, if we come out of here, that's pretty much, pretty much our strike, no matter what, is going to have to come out like this. We don't really have a choice there. If we come out of Kola, I'm just going to try this real quick. Again, 4,600 miles is our limit here. That gets us, that's not going to hit Texas. Can it hit D.C.? Barely hits DC. You get a little bit of New England here, and you get a little bit of this. So it looks to me like our Tu-16s are going to have to basically come out of here, which means you're going to get pretty much, remember, we have about 2,600 nautical miles. That's going to get us kind of this side of things, but it's not too bad. So let's go ahead and create our sides now. Add edit sides. We'll call them red 4. We don't actually know what they're going to be, but that's fine for me. We're going to go ahead and grab our other side. We'll call it blue 4. Go ahead and press that one as well. We'll set them to be very unhappy with each other because as soon as they find out they launched everything, they're going to get a little grumpy. So let's grab red 4. So I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to create myself just a little marshalling point here that just kind of reminds me of exactly where we are. I'm going to call this Marshall. Oh man, this is confusing. We'll call this Marshall Point Tu-16. The whole purpose of this is just to let me know where everybody's going to be coming from. My other ones, the Tu-4s on the flip side, I'm going to make them have to go the long way. So if we come directly out of here, it's, like I said, your Severnaya side of things, I think, we can just about get to Florida. I don't think we can get to Texas from here. Yes, we can get to Texas from there. So that's going to be Marshall Point Tupolev 4A. Go ahead and grab that one, disable it. Marshall Point Tu-4A. This is going to be important for us because these are going to be our 2 starting points for our massive, massive bomber strikes. So that's pretty much all I need to do on that side so far. I've got myself kind of my initial Marshall points. I've got myself everything else. So now we enter the difficult part, and this is the part that everybody gets a little bit stuck on when they're building scenarios like this. And that's going to be to install all of the squadrons and all of the air bases that are going to be protecting the continental United States. So how do we figure this out? Well, the great news is we have this thing called Wikipedia. I'm going to go ahead and type in tactical, what we'll call it, Air Defense Command. Go ahead and hit that one real quickly. And it gives you this great little layout, which talks all about the different years, all about the different aircraft. But importantly for us, it breaks it down by what Air Force, what region, and if you look carefully enough, it'll actually tell you what your air defense sectors are and everything that you're going to possibly need along these lines. Now, what you can do is you can go through each one of these, and they'll talk about like the different aircraft and all the different people like that are going to be coming through it. Again, this is pretty involved as far as doing research. So what I would do is I'd actually come in here, and I've done this step for you, so you don't have to worry about that too much for it. Let's see, interceptor aircraft. I will go to interceptor squadrons. And you can see that it actually breaks us down by squadron, by year, by airplane. So this is a tremendous amount of information. And it's also written in a way that's extremely difficult to work with because you actually have multiple problems here. You have air bases, which you're going to have to locate. You've also got squadrons, which you're going to have to name. Then you're going to have aircraft, which you're going to have to assign. So what I did, and I took a couple minutes to do this a little bit earlier so that I didn't have to sit here and do it in front of you kind of a thing, is I actually broke it down a little bit like this. I have all the different Air Force bases here, and again, I located all the different squadrons on it. What I did not do, which was going to take a lifetime, was actually label each and every one of these squadrons. If you were to do that step, you'd be here for a very, 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 very long time. So that's something that I do typically avoid, because like I said, I'm not going to make this video of 16 hours of me going through. By the way, there's this thing that you're going to hear about called scenario creep, where you take a neat scenario and you basically make it too big. But that's going to bother us. So now what are we going to do? So we know where the air bases themselves are. We know what squadrons and how many of each one of the squadrons are going to be located at that air bases. How do we translate that into command? Well, there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's kind of the hard way. There's kind of the easier way. There's a bunch of different methods. But the method I actually use for this, let me go ahead and grab my Google Earth real quickly here. Go ahead and pull this down so you all can see it. Boop. Is what I actually, whoa, sorry about that. Give me that. Is what I actually did is I created a little KML that had all the different air bases located around the United States. And then I made sure they're all labeled correctly. This took a little while to do, but it wasn't exactly killer because, again, you had the great resource that I'd already taken notes on. Now, one of the greatest things about Command is you actually have the ability to take this KML file, save the KML file, and you can actually go ahead and basically convert that KML file into an imports file. So after I did all that step, again, I'm kind of skipping that bit here because I'll be here for a little while if I do that. As I simply built an import file, I'll go down to Cold War database, I'll go down to United States, and you can see I have Cold War air bases. So I just boop, just like that. And then I instantaneously have all, did I accidentally put them on the Russian side? I did. So apparently Americans are also the USSR today, so I can fix that. And this gave me all of the air bases. Now, since I have all the air bases all ready to go, now it's simply a matter of going through and programming each one of these squadrons being located at that base. Now, typically the way I would do that is I come up here, let's say I would grab this air base here. One thing is for sure is that when I did do this originally, I made the awful mistake of not naming them properly when I did the conversion. That's something, that's my bad, that's not your bad. So then what I would do is I'd have to go pop over here real quick, go back over to Google Earth and determine exactly which airport this was. Then I simply rename it. So I'll show you what I do for one of those, and then I'll kind of fast forward so you can kind of see what the rest look like, so to speak. So that's Payne Air Force Base. So come up here, type in Payne AFB. I'd go ahead and press Control F6 and bring up my little screen here, and then we just need to find out who is at Payne AFB here. So I'd come down here, I'd scroll down to where Payne AFB is, and it says it is the F-89. Now the F-89 is a very curious aircraft. So you're sitting there going, there's so many different versions of the F-89. Which one do I pick? Well, we want to pick the one we have. So if you take a look here at my years, remember we're at 1955. Well, we will be at 1955. Let's go ahead and fix that mistake I just made real quick. 1955, we'll make it right in the middle of the summer. And of course, we'll make it extremely early in the day. We'll do 0630. Copy. Okay, delightful. Okay, that's a little better. So we know that none of these aircraft are available except the D model of the Scorpion. So now we know in the United States, all squadrons are about 24 wide. So come down here, I'll type in 24, I'll press add. Now you're probably saying, well, wait a minute, can you actually name this properly? Because I mean, if I click on this right now, boop, and look at this, these are called Black Lancer 1. You know, that's kind of generic. Can we actually do the appropriate squadron name? The answer is yes, absolutely. So we could go up here and go back to Payne. Payne, Washington, that's the wrong one. Yep. The 321st Fighter Interceptor Squadron. So we can come up here and we can grab these guys just like that. We could post them down like this. Or if we want to be a little bit cool, we could do FIS, just to be a little bit safer. We'd say there's 24 because that's how large a squadron. Well, I just gave them Bison Bs. Sorry about that. We'll go with F-89Ds. Again, this is going to be United States Air Force. Add. So now we have the actual squadron. So when I bring them up, you'll see it gives me the actual squadron here. Now remember, there aren't just one of these air bases. There's going to be several. There's like 50 of these spread around the United States. So this can take a very long time. So as a scenario designer, you need to ask yourself, is it worth me to polish the cannonball? Some people think it's like the greatest thing in the world because you can tell me exactly which plane crashed or something like that. So let's say we went ahead and we did all these squadrons and just went all the way through it. And, you know, we kind of snap our fingers and bang, it's all done. Oh, there we go. Haha. So now, bang, it's all done. So what we do now is we'd have to go ahead and once we have all the squadrons where they need to be, is go ahead and equip them so that they're ready. I gotta stop saying go ahead. I'm sorry. So I'm gonna click on that and press F6. So this is a typical little squadron here. Notice I opted not to go ahead and label each squadron by squadron because again, without the individual histories of them, it's going to be very difficult to know exactly which one. And again, it's running into the polish the cannonball problem. So how many of these aircraft do we need to make available to the player? Now, some people would argue there's no reason to put a full squadron here, and I actually kind of agree with those people. The reason being, of course, is if we do choose to do something along those lines, you're going to have other issues because now there's a lot of units you have to keep track of in a scenario. Usually, as a general rule, I like to use a third at a time. So I'm going to grab this one, I'll grab this one right here, click that, and I'm going to go ahead and select their typical loadout, which is the Mighty Mouse rocket. Typically, what I do is then you take the next third of the squadron, and you go ahead and make them arming. They're not armed, they are arming. Then we come down here, ready arm, we're going to go ahead and slap these guys into maintenance unavailable. Now, one interesting problem we're going to run into is our time to ready is going to be 3 hours, which is actually extremely unlikely because it's kind of early in the morning, number one, and it's also technically during peacetime. So as a result, we can solve that if we go up to our, kind of all down here. Obviously, we want to grant the use of nuclear weapons here. We could cause this scenario to be using a sustained air operation kind of a scenario. Of course, if there's nuclear Armageddon on the way, sustained might not actually be a likely plan that we'd be using here. So you have to make a decision from a scenario perspective if you want to use either one of these. Sustained is going to take 20 hours to arm those airplanes, which is probably not going to be enough time. But again, if you want to make the scenario a lot harder, you make it sustained. If you want to make it a little easier, you can put it to surge. We'll put it to sustain because we're jerks. Okay, so then what you would have to do, of course, is you can see there's quite a few of these air bases, and each one of them have been populated by the appropriate squadrons, is you'd have to go through and basically arm each one of these ones, so each one is going to be a third. Now, there's something kind of interesting, and I thought this would be kind of a fun example. If I go up to Duluth, you notice my F-86Ds are ready, but they're red. The reason being is it's the middle of the night, and these aircraft were not night-rated aircraft. So as a result, you actually cannot use them at night. So if the bombers show up in the middle of the night, we're kind of busted. Okay, so we're basically going to go through that. Now that's all set. I've got all my air bases. Everything's ready to go. Next thing we're going to be taking a look at is going to be our air defense, kind of our warning. Now, if you remember from what we took a look at in that book a little bit earlier, the method they used for this was basically having the pine tree line, the dew line, and basically a bunch of radar stations kind of along the frontier here. Remember, since this is our scenario, we can kind of design it how we want. So we know that the bombers are basically going to be coming from over here, and we know the rest of the bombers are going to be coming from over there. So we have no need really of putting radar stations in places the bombers won't show up. I know you're sitting there going, well, that's kind of unrealistic. Well, you need to think about it another way for a second here. If they are coming here and they're not coming over here, this is a lot of CPU cycles we're going to be wasting doing constant radar calculations for literally hundreds of radar stations against 1,000 individual targets. If you do the math on that real quickly, you realize that gets a little absurd pretty quick. That being said, we're going to do the best we can with what we have. So we're going to compromise. So I'm going to go ahead and load these units in. Go to imports, exports. Again, this is built in by naturals. You don't have to worry about this too much. Continental US. So we have the SAM sites, which we'll need. We have the dew line, and of course we have pine tree, and of course we have sage. We're going to leave sage out. It's just more units we don't need. So I'm going to grab the pine tree. I'm going to grab the dew and press load selected installations. You're going, hey, that wasn't so bad. Boop. Oh. Oh, you thought it wasn't so bad, eh? Yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of radar stations that particularly loads in. And thank God somebody took the time to create and put all these things in here, because this would have taken me half a lifetime to basically get all this information. The air bases were bad enough, trust me when I say that. So like I was saying a minute ago, we only need the radars we're actually going to be using here. So there's a couple different philosophies we can use to sort of approach that. First, of course, we can get rid of the dew line, which I know you're probably sitting there going, wait, why would you get rid of the dew line? Because that's like the critical early warning position. Well, you're not wrong in that regard. Or, of course, we can come down here, we can get rid of the pine tree line. Now, the pine tree line is going to be kind of our last emergency. So this is the one line that you want to hang on to as much as possible. So it's like, well, what do you do? Do we get rid of those? Do we get rid of those? Oh no, what do we do? Well, the strategy I would actually advise here, and this is actually very, very interesting if you want to do it. By the way, they named each one of these, which blows my mind. Again, thank you. Thank you. That was great research. One thing we could do here is we could go ahead and design it so that, we've got everything. We're only using like half the radar stations turned on at any time. Or we could leave it to the player whether or not they want to turn the radar stations on or off. Kind of what I'm thinking is basically removing the side of the dew line we don't actually need. Remember, they're going to be coming from this way, basically through here, which means stuff down here is worthless. Stuff in here is worthless. If we come from up here, like I said, Severnaya and stuff like that, the middle is going to become much more important. But you can see that drawing this arc, The most useless radar stations are the ones basically over here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to press the 9 key so I can select these things. I'm going to grab all these over here that I don't need and look away while I press the delete key. Boom, they're gone. Also, we know that these are not really going to serve a purpose because there's nobody going to be coming from that perspective. And we know that these way, 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 way over here are not going to serve much of a purpose either. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those as well. So now what we've done is we've just taken the two lines and we've shrunk them significantly. So we have kind of the northwest version of the DO line and we kind of have the south version of the pine tree line. There's actually another, it's called the Mid-Canada line, which we don't have represented here, which is even more radar stations. So you're going to have to kind of think about that. Now, good creative scenario designers will actually break several of these radar stations in order to simulate, mechanical maintenance or anything along those lines. All right, so this is all set now. This is all set now. I'm kind of happy the way this is going. I'll do a quick save, so we're good to go. So basically what we're going to do now is we now need to think about what are the targets of this massive raid of Russian bomber is going to be. So the way I like to do this one is I like to get myself what they call the World Cities Import. That gives us the ability to import all the different cities throughout the United States so that we can quickly, basically have themselves some targets and they're ready to go. Okay, I think this is probably going to be a pretty good place to call this video. I've been rambling for 21 minutes already, and you can kind of already see I'm starting to get kind of the structure of this. This part took a little while, as you can probably imagine, and I will make this scenario available for you to play with a little later on. So like each and every one of these air bases has got themselves plenty of interceptors, and we'll deal with strategy as well as the Russians next time. Enjoy.